murder liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're now tapped in. I wanted to talk about Africa. Something is shifting on this continent. And I don't think we're talking about it enough. Not in social media, especially not in, world media, global media, those media outlets that are ran by those who run everything. Let me take you back. January 27, 2025 in Accra, Ghana. President JOHNMAHAMA is sworn in for his second term there. 21 African heads of states are in that room. All right, 21 of them. But in walks IBRAHIM TRAORE in military fatigues, sidearm on his hip. He gets the loudest ovation of anyone there. Not the elected president in suits, all right? Not all them dignitaries and, again, presidents, prime ministers. They didn't get that ovation. Him, he got it, Traore. This is not a small detail, people. And it comes off as such because, again, mainstream media ignores this fact. They say nothing about it. There's a reason for that. This is a huge signal that the optics, not just the optics are changing, but the mindset of those on the continent is actually shifting towards something better. This is probably why mainstream media does not highlight or put in its programs, all right, those things that show growth, those things that show productivity, positivity, those things that show empowerment, and those things that point to independence and or sovereignty. This is probably why they don't do it. They don't want to paint that picture or put that picture out there that Africa is waking up now. Understandable, especially for those who've been colonizing the continent for as long as they have. That's understandable. You have to think about that. Because look, here's what's really important. Here's what's really important, because here's what happened next. All right. Mahama didn't distance himself from that moment. He stood in it. In fact, he welcomed it. He didn't feel any kind of way. He didn't feel one way or another. He was very diplomatic about that whole process or how that played out. Good for him. What he did is he leaned in. His first official trip out of the country went straight to Ouagadougou, BURKINAFASO. That was his first trip. Then to Mali, and then to Niger. The same three nations that just walked out of ECOWAS. All right. And let it be told, it's alleged that ECOWAS, and even to some respect or some extent, the African Union, is ran by the West. The same three nations his own predecessor tried to isolate, sanction, and then threaten into line. Ghana, the president before Mahama, did all those things. Did all those things. So, I think tonight isn't just about, what is Traore doing? Tonight we're going to have a bigger discussion. The bigger question is the rest of Africa standing or starting to stand on this square and starting to look at what Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are deciding and is doing? That's the blueprint worth the risk, I think. Is there an actual awakening happening? Not just among leaders in suits, but among the people themselves. That is the big question. That's what's being hidden from the view of people all over the world. This is why mainstream media will not show what's really taking place there. When they made attempts to put Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in the limelight, it was all negative. All military juntas have taken over, and they're going to steal all the wealth. The pot calling the kiddo black, right? Look, let's look at what's real, all right? And what's still just talk. I have a clip. I'm going to bring in this clip, man, for greater context. And you guys tell me, This is John Mahama actually speaking to a Western reporter about these issues and what is taking place on the continent, this shift that is actually happening that mainstream media and those in power do not want others around the world to see, particularly those on the continent. All right. So the diplomacy of Mahama, you know, and this thing they call the new, I think they call it the new real politic over in Ghana. Let's bring that clip in. Before I do, please, as always, like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe. You are tapped in. This is the Art of Political Discourse. We thank you for your participation and viewership. Now, that being said, let's get to this clip because I think it is noteworthy. Noteworthy. All right. So let's bring this in right here. And you guys tell me what you think. I want you to keep in mind that we're going to start with Ghana, all right, in terms of this clip, because Ghana is the clearest signal that we have right now that this shift is actually taking place, that something is really changing on the continent of Africa. John Mahama, again, he took office back in January of 2025. That's his second term. And almost immediately, you know, we saw a different posture than his predecessor. He came in a little more dignified, a little more diplomatic, you know, open, it seemed, you know what I mean? So, you know, when you look at his behavior and then compare it to his predecessor, the guy that came before him, you'll see that difference. All right. Nana Afako Abdul, and that was the guy before him, when he was ECOWAS's chair during the coup wave, he backed sanctions against Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. He even backed the threat of military intervention. And again, this is the guy who sat in the seat before Mahama. All right. That was the old approach to isolate these rogue states in the Sahel, you know, and who was given this direction? Who was saying to do this? A lot of people still to this day act like they don't know. They wonder, or let's say it as it is, or has it been, or has been said. It's been alleged that France and the United States is making these orders and these calls for them, ECOWAS, African Union, those who they know they could still pull the strings on to do these things. That's what's being alleged. All right. So his thing or their thing was to isolate the three Sahel states, what is known today as the AES. All right. Isolate them. That was the old approach. Squeeze them. Also one of their approaches. And wait for them to fold. That was the play from the playbook. And that is what those countries surrounding the AES states were doing. You know, plain and simple. But Mahama, he threw away that playbook. He threw it out. He decided, nah, it's not worth it. His first official trip after taking office wasn't to a Western capital like we see most of these puppets do. Put on a nice fine suit and they go for the photo op. You know, shake hands, like looking at master, like, thank you, sir. You know, that wasn't what we saw with Mahama. That was not what he portrayed. All right. His first move was to go over to Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. That was his first. That was an official, the trip he took first among all others. Again, it wasn't a photo op in the West or the United States. He bypassed all that. Great for him. All right. Now, again, and he didn't stop there. That same diplomatic tour rolled straight into, like I say, Mali and Niger. All right. All three AES states, and back to back. All right. And when Mahama talks about the security crisis in the region, and that's something that you have to talk about because Ghana's right there, you know, and I don't know if they experience the same level of jihadist insurgencies and, you know, all these terrorist attacks and things like that in and out of their borders. I don't know exactly how that plays out in Ghana, but fact of the matter is that is a threat to Ghana as well. You know, it is. So listen to the language he's choosing. All right. He's called terrorism, quote, a cancer that must be addressed through united action. He is not drawing a hard line between ECOWAS and the AES anymore. That is deliberate, or that is a deliberate choice. That is a leader, all right, who looked at the sanctions and isolation strategy, watched it fail for years, and decided cooperation will with the Sahel bloc is the smarter play. Now, I want to be careful here in this respect, because I'm not going to put words in Mahama's mouth. Again, I have a clip. You can hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. All right. He has not stood at a podium and let's say said, hey, Ghana should copy everything Ibrahim Traore, Goita, and Tchiani is doing in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. I'm not saying he's saying that. All right. What he has done, though, is something quieter and maybe just as telling. He's treating Traore as a legitimate regional partner instead of an outlaw government, a junta, outlaw junta government. You know, he's treating them like legitimate diplomats, presidents, and leaders of their country. That's the difference. That's the difference. That matters a great deal as well. And in West Africa diplomacy, that shift is postures. Its posture speaks almost as loud as a speech would. All right. Now, that being said, let me drop this clip in here because I think that's important. Again, give us greater context. And this is, as I put it, this is John Mahama speaking for himself. You don't have to impart anything in what he said. It's coming from his mouth. All right. Let's get in there.
My people, what he's saying is that Africa must have greater control over its natural resources. He said African countries must stop simply exporting raw materials while others make most of the money from them. And he called for Africa to negotiate with the rest of the world from a position of greater strength. Now, here is where things become interesting, because when you listen to Mahama's argument, you may hear an idea that sounds very familiar to what has been happening in Burkina Faso under Captain Ibrahim Traore and other Sahel countries. Let's continue to listen to him.
There were still 3 nations that voted against this resolution, yes, which in fact you were mostly behind. It's a resolution that Ghana, yes, pushed through. 3 countries voted against: the United States, Israel, and Argentina. Did that surprise you?
It didn't surprise me.
Why not?
Because we had got an indication from the United States that they won't support it. And the main argument they put was that you cannot create a hierarchy of crime.
But were you disappointed that they voted against?
I was disappointed that they did, because I don't hold the US accountable for slavery. Those slaves were brought there mostly by European powers, because at that time, US itself was a colony. Even though after the abolition and after the United States became an independent country, slavery continued until the Civil War was fought. And that was eventually what freed the slaves in the US. So I don't think the US should take responsibility for slave trade. I mean,
but the US benefited greatly.
Well, yeah, see, in some respects, that's John Mahama's misinformed on a couple of things. You know, I have to say that just listening that 20, 30 seconds of what he said, yeah, he's misinformed. He's misinformed on a couple of things.
I mean, they build their railways, they did things for them and all that, but I don't think that they should bear the guilt, you know, in a certain sense for it, because I would have thought that the European countries that brought the slaves there would feel more adverse to the resolution and probably would have voted for it, but even they abstained.
But this was a symbolic resolution, yes, wasn't it?
Yes.
Which essentially called the slave trade the gravest crime against humanity.
Yeah.
But you have gone further.
Yes.
You have been calling for reparations.
Yeah.
Is that wishful thinking? How do you make countries that benefited from the slave trade actually pay back?
It's justified. It's justified because...
But is it realistic?
It's justified. And when we talk about reparations, we don't kid ourselves that those nations will just get up and write a big fat check and say, here you are, you're paid off for what happened. No. We think that there are many aspects to reparations. First, acknowledgement. Let's acknowledge it. It's like they want us to sweep it under the carpet. Before you couldn't talk about reparations and slave trade. It's a closed chapter. that's it. We don't talk about it. We say, no, let's talk about it. Let's acknowledge. And since the resolution, you'll be surprised at what's happening. Several, organizations and nations have begun to say, look, I think let's talk. Let's create a dialogue on this issue.
But this is not about financial reparations, is it, Mr. President?
No, not about it. We're talking about acknowledgement. We're talking about healing. We're talking about, reparations can take the form of changing the global order. It takes many forms. And I'm saying that I don't think that they're going to write a 300 billion check and say, here you are, descendants of slaves. Here you are, take this check and, let's let it pass. We must even learn from the lessons of history. We talk about the Holocaust today, we still talk about it because never again should it happen that millions of people are taken.
Well, again, so he's misinformed in a few respects now. Why would that be good for Ashkenazi Europeans after the so-called Holocaust for them to receive reparations, and not only just reparations, but a seat at the table? You know what I mean? I mean, a real seat at the table. Why is it okay for them and not okay for Africans or the descendant of African slaves, the descendants of indigenous Americans here who are enslaved, not to receive reparations and or a seat at the table? Why is that okay for one but not okay for another? Why is it okay for Germany to pay reparations to Ashkenazi, people for crimes against humanity, and not okay for America and the rest of the West who had a hand in slavery not pay for their crimes against humanity? I don't make it make sense.
You can put in railway trucks and sent it to gas chambers and gas to them. That was all, but we can't forget it. If we forget and we don't acknowledge what happened and all pledge that we will work to not make it happen again, it could happen again.
But isn't it happening again, Mr. President? When you look at what's going on in Palestine,
you look at Gaza, you look at the West Bank.
What would you call it?
It's what it is.
Is it a genocide?
I said it works like a duck. It looks like a duck. It's a duck.
It's a genocide.
Of course. Because, look at the number of people who have been killed. Of course, we condemn.
He seemed reluctant to use the term genocide, though. He did.
Hamas did, killing 1,300 Israelis. But the toll on the other side, 65,000 women and children have been killed since that October strike. And even today in the West Bank, settlers are hounding Palestinians of their land, and they go create the problem with families that have been settled on that land for many years. And then they go and tell the Israeli authorities that the Palestinians are, attacking them, and the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, comes without asking any questions, joins the settlers to brutalize the Palestinians,
You talk about the need to reform the global system. International justice is a key part of it, isn't it?
Exactly.
Does this demonstrate the double standards that we see today? When you compare the situation in Ukraine and the situation in Gaza, can we ever talk about justice anymore?
It's not the first time. It's been with us. Look at the fight against apartheid.
This is how my employees clock in today.
This little thing has helped my business save tens of thousands of dollars. Remember how we used to clock in? Yeah.
Passed the consensus, they called the Zuni consensus. And we said that we wanted the global reform of the United Nations to involve expanding the Security Council and allowing greater African representation, and then at the same time, either removal of the veto or extension of the veto to cover the expanded membership. Now, the point I've made, and I've made it before and I'll make it again, is that rule that stops us from putting our reserves in an African financial institution. If we took 30% of our reserves and decided to put it into an African monetary fund, nobody can stop us.
How soon can that happen realistically?
Well, we have to come to a consensus. On the sidelines of the AU, we normally hold a function for African financial institutions. At the last discussion, this came up, including other ways in which we could strengthen those institutions. And so every year we compare notes and see how we're doing. For instance, the African Exim Bank is doing very well in terms of financing, important investments. And so we need a railway to the mines. We need an aluminum refinery. We need a thermal power plant to provide power. These are things that if we decide to go to the international capital market for money, the rate at which we'll borrow will be too expensive. But if we could borrow from an African financial institution at 2%, 3%, I mean, that would be wonderful.
Ghana is the top gold producer in Africa.
Yes.
How much leverage can that give you?
It gives us a lot of leverage, especially if we're able to formalize the gold production. We have the large-scale mines that, I mean, are transparent. We know what is happening. We know we supervise the mining. We know how much they are shipping out. But we also have the informal, artisanal, and small-scale mining. That is where we've had the most difficulty, but we're formalizing it now. And so we're giving them licenses, and then we're supervising them better. But we're buying the gold off them before it used to be smuggled out by anybody. We're buying the gold off them. And that took production from 64 tons in 2024 to 104 tons and brought $10.8 billion into the economy. But we're going one step beyond just exporting the raw gold. We have 2 refineries currently operating in Ghana, the Gold Coast Refinery and Royal Ghana Gold. And we are refining that gold before export. It's part of the whole value addition policy that I told you about.
So at the end of your term, would economic success look like Ghana refining its gold?
Yes.
Or
and actually producing
more
jewelry.
than that?
Producing jewelry. You know, speaking with the gold board, and they're going to build a gold souk in Ghana to produce African and Ghanaian jewelry. And so next time you come in to buy your earrings, you're probably not going to go to Dubai. You're going to come to Accra and buy beautiful Jinyomi earrings.
So I'll be buying not just...
Well, he should have kept that part to himself, because I'm pretty sure those who are in the market for designing jewelry, creating jewelry, are now saying, okay, yeah, let's go on and, you know, let's flood the market, get our stuff out there now, because we're set up to do it now. While they're still talking about it, we're going to do it. That is a problem for them. In terms of what they're doing for the Ghanaians, is, I think, a great move, a move that should have been made a long time ago. One, getting ownership, taking control of their mines. That's one. 2, production or processing. See, they're still shipping or exporting gold to France to be processed, procured, you know, refined. And then they're shipping it back, though, but they have to pay for that. You know what I mean? France has done what they've done, took theirs off the top, and there it is, you know? So that's something you got to think about. Are they making the right moves? They probably are. You know, and that's a good thing. All right? That is a good thing. So I want to tip my hat to JOHNMAHAMA. He is actually making those moves that matter. So let's see what comes of this. All right? Give us your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you stand on this. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter.